Well, I guess it's true after all. You gotta fake it until they make it. Here's a look at Mattel, He-Man, and the Master Universe Masterverse Vintage Collection Faker. Universe action figure Faker joins the vintage collection, designed at Masterverse 7-inch scale and inspired by the original Motu toy design. With 30 points of articulation, this blue-skinned He-Man imposter comes with a power sword, shield, and axe, as well as a removable die-cast robot recorder in his chest and an extra set of hands. All the background banter, I'm sure, of how he's not a He-Man is probably making this man blue. Let's take, though, the tape measure, shall we, and see how tall the Master Universe Masterverse Vintage Collection Faker stands. And then, speaking of that He-Man, we'll bring in his original mold brother, even though he's not really obviously related. Let's take, though, the tape measure as promised. Faker from the Vintage Collection is going to stand at 7 inches in height. Yeah, you can see it for yourself. That's going to translate, though, to a figure that's 18 centimeters tall. Not really loving the mold, but it certainly has been a mold we've already gotten from He-Man. The sizing, though, between the two figures may actually look like He-Man's just a little bit taller, but I think a lot of it really has to do as well with the wide stance that I've got currently for Faker. What was kind of alarming, though, is when I bring in Skeletor. Skeletor seems notably smaller. I think a lot of it really has probably to do with the length of his neck and probably just the way that the head is so lower down on that. But yeah, considering that he is also a vintage figure, it's surprising that Skeletor comes up so short. Here's also what the figure looks like, with a reminder again, I need to get myself a brand new Faker. The new Eternia release of him. While liking the look of him, I still don't like the fact he's got this big smudge right across the top of his forehead. So I'm going to see if I can get a better Faker. And of course, if we're also going to be looking at Faker, I love the look of this guy. Have to also bring in the Origins version of him. I don't have the original vintage, but if I did, I'd certainly bring him in. Now, everybody, to the left, you'll see his sword. That was the thing inside the tray with him. Everything, though, to the right was inside of a little mystery bag that was inside of a compartment space that was only about yay big. It wasn't really even indicated. There was just a little tiny marker on the top just to tell you that that would be opened. But if you didn't see that marker, you missed the point altogether, and you'd likely throw away the packaging. So if you are opening up your Faker right now at the time of watching this video, which would be very coincidental, just make sure, of course, you pull out the bag and then, of course, rip it open. If you rip it open, inside you'll find the wonders of a shield and also a battle axe. The shield does have some really noticeably marbling effects, though. You can see, though, on the plastic. I don't really love the look of this. This, though, would have been the exact same shield we also got included with He-Man, and then also the same battle axe would have also been there as well. By the way that this has this kind of marbling markage, you can kind of see, though, it's not really quite the same color as the battle axe. The battle axe is a little bit more of a matte plastic. I think I actually would have preferred the shield to be the same. Both of them can be held in his hand. If you look on the back of the shield, there's a handle and then there's a loop. The loop goes through his forearm. I'm only going to indicate right now with my pointer finger, and then he'd be able to grip on the end of that. Yeah, the shield is okay. I just don't think, I think the marbling takes a little bit away from that. I like the look of the battle axe, though. And of course, this does fit into his hands. He does have some swappable hand available options, too. On this side, if you don't like the look of a gripping hand, that can be swapped out with a closed fist, good for punching He-Man. On this side, though, the figure does also have a swappable hand. So if you don't want to have a relaxed hand like he has right now, even though, honestly, this is the better hand for him to hold the shield, because you just easily slide the hand up there and to take the handle and fit it around his hand. That's not going to be going anywhere. When you start to swap out hands, though, now you have to contend with the idea of trying to fit these blasted fingers around the handle. I know sometimes it's also easier just to kind of clip this around the handle first and then try your best to attach it onto the forearm. But if you want to go with shields, I find this is the better hand for holding the shield. It doesn't really serve necessarily as a gripping hand, but I think it does the better job of holding the shield. Let's go ahead and take his battle axe, put it into the other hand as well. And then after that, we'll look at his power sword. There's his battle axe on one side, shield on the other. Nice, nice, nice. What's also nice, too, is the figure does also come included with his variation of power sword. Now, everything's decked out here in more of a copper color. This happens to be the same sword. He-Man had one, too. I just happen to have Skeletor's on the ready. It's the same molding of sword as what Skeletor got. I do really like, though, that they've added a darker color to Skeletor's sword. I honestly think really like the coloring works really well. I know like the shield's a little bit on a darker coloring of that same kind of scale, but I think like the lighter color, if they stuck to this, I think the gold would have worked all better with the 3 accessories. Now the sword can be held in his hands. You can also as well look on the back of his body. and there's a holster on the back. Now, he's using the same armor, really, as Skeletor, and that works the same way. He basically just holsters the sword on the back. So, at any given point, while he doesn't have really the powers to pull from Grayskull, at least he can pull out and draw the sword on the back of his armor. Okay. Let's go remove his battle axe right now. We'll go ahead and just remove his shield. And let's slide out his sword. Getting a closer look, though, at Faker. Now, Faker does have, obviously, the same build and body of He-Man. He also happens to be using the exact same face. I didn't love this He-Man head sculpt. The longer, though, I've had this on my shelf, not that I've really warmed up to it, but I don't dislike it as much as I did before. I find, though, that Faker, even though it is using the same head, seems to do the head a little bit better. I don't know if it's just the fact that his features look a little bit more sharper, perhaps, that he also doesn't have all the additional darker, kind of dingier, dirtier face that He-Man had. But I feel like Faker does the head a little bit better. The bodies are exactly the same. The armor also isn't. We're going to be talking about more of that in a moment. The arms, the biceps, the forearms, even like the loincloth seems to be exactly the same. Also, just like Faker's doing it a little bit different in color. The legs are also shared between the two. And you also see as well, he does have the same furry boots. Located on the bottoms of both their feet are peg holes. So if you want to attach these things on the display stand, you can certainly do that. So that's what he's borrowing from He-Man. What he is borrowing, though, from Skeletor is the same top armor piece. Although Skeletor also would have had a lot more of the nicer purple that they painted on the front, Faker doesn't really have a whole lot of that. He's kind of got a little bit more of that kind of darker gold silver. It's on the front, it's on the sides there as well, and beaded along the top flaps of the shoulder straps. Not really so shoulder straps. On the back of his body, though, you can detach the armor in the same way that pretty much all the Motu figures would do. Now, what's interesting, though, is if you detach it on one side, do it on the other. We'll go ahead and pop Faker's head off. I did want to show you guys what his armor it looks like off, because one thing that's notable about Faker, he does have a little control panel here. The panel would have had like little wheels that would have rotated. This would be old-time computer talk in here. Like little wheels that would have rotated. Every time you kind of go back and watch those old sci-fi films from like the 70s and early 80s, computers would generally be like an entire room full of those. And then you'd usually have these long tablets, like cabinets, where all these things would be rotating and have little lights flashing. Faker has that. It kind of actually looks like he's more of it looks kind of like a robotic face. The eyes, the nose, kind of somewhat of a mouth. What's interesting, though, is I think some of the read-up was faked online, because they actually describe this as a removable die-cast piece. There's two things really wrong with that. First of all, I can't seem to remove it at all. I don't think it's supposed to be intended to be removed. Second of all, I don't think it's die-cast. I think it's just plastic. I mean, really, why would Mattel choose to have this being die-cast when everything else on the figure is clearly just in plastic? So yeah, there is a little bit of faking out that's been done here. And not removable, not being die-cast, but at least he does have this sculpted. It's not just a sticker. Also, if you want to put the armor back on, you're just going to go and fit it on top of his head. Super, super easy to strap back in place. One side's done already, and then we'll just do the other side here. Yeah, like the armor looks okay for Faker. I mean, obviously, if you like the motif of blue and orange, I mean, two colors that really shouldn't go well together. Faker's really always been known for that. The one thing that they did do differently, as I go ahead and pop his head back in place, when we did get the new Eternia release of Faker, Faker had more of the colors kind of in this dark red. I also really thought the colors of his body was a little bit nicer with the blue. The one thing I would also say too, and I just sort of hold the two so you guys can say, they're not using really not much of the same body, like the same lower legs. Torso clearly is a lot bigger on the vintage release. And yes, this Faker does also have a big smear right across the tops of his forehead. Oh, such a shame. It's such a shame when you order a figure online. Then you get the figure and you're like, oh, this is just a disaster. Do I want to return it? Do I have to get the label, slap it on the box, pack up the box, send it on its merry little way, wait to get the refund, order a new figure, or do I just stick with the one that I have? Clearly, I just stuck with the one that I have. The one thing I will also say, too, is like the colors are pretty close to the origins. Although I really wish, though, they could have done the darker blue. The lighter blue works okay, but I think if you're really going to go with Faker, I don't expect him to have the bright red hair. But I do think, though, the blue would have worked a little bit better had it been maybe this color and not the lighter. Now for the figure's articulation, Faker does have all basically the same poseability points as He-Man. Head's going to rotate all the way around. It's going to hinge up and down. And then also you can move it back and forth as well. Not really much, just because the shoulders are going to get in the way of things. Speaking of, hey, the shoulders getting in the way of things, rotating his arm all the way around can be a little problematic, just because these little flap things sticking out. The arms, however, can be pulled out at a 90-degree angle bend. You can also swivel the bicep, double hinge on the elbow. Hands rotate all the way around. Now, that's granted using the hands that we have right now. Say if you did want to swap out the hands. Let's just go ahead and pop this one off right now. I really wasn't planning to do this, but just to show you guys what the hand looks like when it's removed. The hands are extremely tight. It doesn't help either that I've got myself some moisturizer on my own hands. Just go ahead and pop the hands off the pegs. Why is this being so difficult? Why I did also want to show you guys there we go, is that you can also remove the guard. If you don't like the look of the guard on the forearm, just, hey, slide it off. Just put it to the side and never talk to it again. But just to take that off, we're going to swap it out with the gripping hand. So, of course, if Faker then wants to double wield his weapons, you can do that easily. Not so easily was taking off the hand, but you can see. The upper torso is going to be on a very good ball joint. I mean, he's got quite a lot of mass here for the top of his torso. The figure does also have just a standard swivel for his waist. Splitting on the legs is easy to do when you have yourself ball joints working behind the scenes. The figure does have 3/4 of the way, 3/4 of the way up the thigh, there's a swivel cut, so you can swivel that back and forth. The figure does also have a double hinge on the knee, which is really tight here in this figure. Swivel on the boots, ankle pivot up and down, ankle rocker back and forth, and I already mentioned the figure does also have pegals on the undersides of his feet. Good looking faker, not a bad looking faker, yeah. I always really, there's something to be said about blue-clad imposters between Faker and then NES Jason Voorhees. I mean, what a stretch when it comes to comparing those figures. I've always really been a big fan of Faker. Also, the designs of him have changed over the years. Also, the new Eternia decided not to go with orange, instead kind of this kind of darker purplish red. I thought it still worked okay for Faker. Still don't like, on top of his head. What's strange, though, is while he is using the same body as He-Man, that would be clearly the case, because obviously he's just an imposter of He-Man. It's strange, though, that he's shorter than Skeletor, or that Skeletor, I should say, is the other way around, is shorter than Faker. He seems to be using the same body, but I think something somehow got lost from the lower half of Skeletor that causes that figure to be a little bit shorter. From an accessory standpoint, while he's boring the body of He-Man, he's also boring over the same power sword, the same one that was also then used for Skeletor. I love the looks of these. I don't love the shield. I know we've already kind of spent time already talking about it. It's, I think, a little too dark. I think it also does have a lot more marbling to it. I wish, though, that they could have cast the shield in the same plastic that they cast for the sword. Something was molded differently between one and the other. I think the shield doesn't look as good as the sword, but at least he does have 3 accessories to wield. You and I both know that he's boring over the body from He-Man. Yet, though, I find Faker makes use of the mold the best out of the 3 figures so far that we've had a look at. It draws less attention just to how big the body actually is. A lot of it, I think, can also be contributed to the fact he's also using the armor from Skeletor. Skeletor still looks swollen in the top of his body, and so did He-Man, really. But somehow, though, using the armor from Skeletor, primarily the body mostly from He-Man, because again, like Skeletor seemed a little bit shorter, I find again, like so far, Faker is the best of the vintage collection. He's not without flaws, though. While I think the coloring of his armor looks really nice, I do feel, though, the coloring of the blue could have been a little bit darker. Not super dark like New Eternia Faker, but if it would just maybe have been a closer color to what we got with the Origins Faker, I think we would have had a much better looking Faker. This one's neat, too, because if you take off the armor, you can see that they didn't just phone it in by putting on an adhesive label or sticker. No, they did actually sculpt in all the computer electronics that are built to his body. Although even advertised online, they say removable, they say die-cast. Neither one exists here for Faker. It's sculpted there, yes, but I don't think you can remove it. If you can, I think you're only going to be removing at the expense of damaging the figure's body, and I don't want to do that. Now, I did order this one from Amazon. It seemed to take forever. I actually ordered it from a third-party seller. I ordered it, and I think I had to wait about 3.5 weeks for this thing to finally arrive. It's not to say that you probably couldn't have ordered this elsewhere. I think it's well now worth it that I finally can add a Faker on the shelf with the rest of the Fakers I've been collecting, along with the Origins, along with the damaged-looking Faker that had the smudge smear on the top of his forehead. I'm definitely going to have to get myself another New Eternia Faker. But what do you guys, though, think of the Vintage Collection Faker? Not a bad-looking figure, eh? Are you guys also liking the look of the bodies? Or do you also feel like the top of the torso are still too big? Some would come from the camp that would say, like, hey, buddy, you got to realize, too, the original Master Universe figures from the 80s would have had a very large top torso. I get that, though, but I feel like maybe the top pectoral area, from, like, his stomach area up, I think it's still a little too big. If you guys did in the meantime enjoy this video, you can do it, of course, the solid by hitting it with a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? Yeah, I hope so. Hit that subscribe, turn on that bell. You're going to get the reminders every single time a new video post. And of course, come back. We're maybe wrapping up things right now in the world of Masterverse, but there will be more videos coming your way in the upcoming days. So making sure you're coming back for those. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.